It took 10 years and 22 singles, but Depeche Mode is now the word in the music called progressive techno-pop. Tonight, the band is appearing in person for an autograph party at a West LA record store. And it has attracted thousands of fans waiting to see their music idols, some who have been lined up since last night.
You could hear the screaming all over the Beverly Center area. A line of teenagers 15 blocks long. Like the swooning over Sinatra, the ecstasy over Elvis, and the fainting over the Fab Four, Depeche Mode is today's hot act.
I haven't seen anything like this before. Girls were crying, boys were hurling themselves at the limousine. Police say now there's maybe 15,000 kids here.
Crowd control problem in West LA tonight.
The private security force could not handle them all, and police had to be called. Some people are calling it a near riot.
Riot police, we are told, have gathered at the Beverly Center.
Police have had to make several arrests, and the band was forced to leave early. Seems like I haven't seen that since the days of the Beatles.
Reach out, touch faith.
You know, it's not the kind of advertising you can buy, and certainly no record company would pay for.
They delivered the classic record at the right time. I mean, what can you say? Really, it was perfect.
Jesus.
We put out a 12-inch way before the album or the single went to radio, and that became like hugely successful, especially in America. I think it ended up selling like 1 million copies or something, which was huge. And nowadays, it's unheard of. You know.
We had a big production meeting before it started, where the band, myself and Daniel, sat and listened to all of Martin's demos, and it stood out head and shoulders as a perfect track to say, oh, here's Depeche Mode, but not as you know.
Reach out, touch faith.
It laid a foundation that we had no idea what was about to happen.
Well, it wasn't really a riot, let's get it straight. I mean, there were a lot of people. It's not what I call a riot. There wasn't any violence involved. A couple of people did get hurt, unfortunately, but basically all the fans that were there were very well behaved. It was, Chelsea on a Saturday afternoon. Now that's a riot.
My main recollection of the event was that how lucky we were to get so much publicity for doing nothing. You know, we'd sort of set ourselves to sit there for 4 hours signing records, and of course we were only there for 4 minutes. So not only did we get out of having to do the chore, but we went back to our hotel, switched on the TV, and were on the first item on the news. So we got maximum exposure from it, far more than we'd really anticipated.
You know, I'm happy to say that was my idea, you know, because, you know, I just was thinking about, okay, what can we do to launch this album that's going to take us into mainstream media? We were on every evening news show around in the country the day before the album was in store. Couldn't have been better in my mind.
My favourite Depeche album is probably Violator, because I didn't work on it at all, and I think it's really great.
Well, for me, I think Violator is probably my favourite.
I thought Violator was a standout album, really.
I thought Violator was a great record.
An absolute perfect album.
Violator, obviously.
Violator.
In my eyes, was the most perfect album they ever did.
I would say the same as Andy, definitely Violator, for a lot of reasons. It was an amazing album from one end to the other end. Every track on it was incredibly strong. What you pick as singles, who knows, because it's just a great album, and you've got a choice of whatever you want to do. And that album did effectively bring most of the media on board for Depeche Mode.
Until that point, I think we felt like we'd been hitting our heads against a wall. All of our records had sold well, but they'd all sold basically the same amount. It was virtually identical. And then suddenly something, sort of like probably the in-store, tipped us over the edge because of all the national coverage that we got in America.
By that time, and even due to the feedback from the press, from the stateside tour and everything, the band was so in everybody's mind, you know. It was really regarded as a very natural thing, you know. It was for us an obvious thing. It just had to be like this, you know. The only point was really the matter whether you get in the top 10 or top 5 or 5 to 1 or whatever.
I'm waiting for the night to fall, when everything is bearable, and there in the still, all that you feel is tranquility. There is a sound in the calm. Someone is coming to harm.
The way that these things seem to happen with Depeche Mode, it's not always down to one specific reason. It's like Flood being involved was a great step, but also from somewhere Martin had just written these just most amazing songs. And to then couple that with somebody who was fast becoming the world's greatest producer, he asked me to say. But then, yeah, so it was just, you know, it was just all the stars lining up, I suppose.
You know, we wanted to keep moving on after Music for the Masses, even though that had worked out very well. I think everybody felt that the fresh blood that time had really pushed things along, and we want to do that again. And Flood just seemed like a pretty obvious choice.
Well, I think we were reassured that Flood was able to do all things. So he was able to be very hands-on. He could work a sampler. He could use an analog synth. He could also come up with ideas, musical ideas, rhythm ideas, but he and very specific, what I call screwdriver work, or we ended up calling screwdriver work. And at the same time, he could take a backseat overview and be, you know, your Svengali type. This is what you need to do, boys. And so, you know, a good all-round producer.
I'd been working a lot with both very heavily synth programmed type bands and big rock bands, and I'd felt that there was a way that the two forms of music could actually work together, and in a way Depeche were the perfect band to work with that idea and methodology.
Flood was the first producer who really pushed us.
Everything that he brought to it was new, and new to us.
Flood said all our preconceived ideas were basically a load of shit. And if you want to use a guitar, you use a guitar. You know, you should do what sounds good. You shouldn't have rules. And because we had a rule that you must never use the same sound twice. And we were sort of running out of sounds big time. So Flood said, "Don't worry about that," you know, and it was great, you know.
Let me take you on a trip around the world and back, and you won't have to move, you just sit still. Now let your mind do the walking, and let my body do the talking. Let me show you the world in my eyes.
We moved into working on World in My Eyes. We started off refining the demo, and I remember one night we all went out, and well, we went out on quite a lot of nights, but I was talking to Alan and Dave, and they both felt that there was something stopping the track, and that maybe the way that we'd attacked the track was not the best. I was going, okay, fine, I understand what you're saying. And then the next morning, Martin and Fletch came into me and said the identical thing. So I said, okay, as everybody is unhappy with the way it's going, let's just throw it out. Throw out everything that you know about it. And myself and Alan then spent half a day just jamming around different ideas. and the bass line and the came out of that. The track had completely changed by the time that Dave and Martin came back, and I think it was quite a shock. That was the place where the essence for change and the way that we were going to work had happened.
All the islands in the ocean, all the heavens in the motion.
Alan had a lot of input up to that point, but Flood in tandem with Alan was a great team.
The album to be fresh, and you want the band to be inspired, and if you just kind of retrace your steps, then you're not going to get that spark or that edge or the chance of something different happening.
Normally what they would do was that after Martin's original demos, they would then go into pre-production and start to refine his basic demos, but this was one of the first places that I wanted to change things.
The finished product often turned out fairly similar to the demos, so he asked me to keep the demos as basic as possible so they were open to interpretation more.
The next track after that was Policy of Truth. And again, started off a little bit in the way that it had been from the demo, but in the end decided to try and experiment and try and get a sort of feeling that was not rock, but it was being driven not by synths. So, we got that guitar riff together and the way that the drums were programmed, and it was a definite shift in everybody's attitude.
Deciding in your youth on the policy of truth.
And I have to give credit to Francois Kevorkian as well in the mixing, sort of brought another level of creativity.
Francois is the people I've ever worked with, the most meticulous mixer I've ever worked with. I mean, it's actually quite hard to be in the room when he's mixing because you don't really know what he's doing.
I don't remember exactly who suggested Francois, but I was quite impressed with the fact that he'd worked with Kraftwerk, who I was very into at the time. I thought he must be pretty good if they'll allow him to work with them, because they've got a reputation for being sticklers, And Francois himself turned out to be a bit of a stickler.
Francois was so pedantic with absolutely everything that he did, that he would often disappear. In the studio, we'd be off in the corner somewhere with a pair of headphones on for 2 days working on a hi-hat, and at times that was very frustrating and very, very boring because we couldn't even hear what he was doing. But we knew that when we actually heard what he'd done to the hi-hat over those 2 days, we could see the value of it.
I think Martin, being songwriter, is more interested in just making sure that when he listens to it, it has the right feel, that it's not interested in all the technical mumbo-jumbo parts of it, that he just wants to know that he hears it and it sounds like what he wanted to write.
think I had some stupid catchphrase that, like, just give me an hour or so to try something. If it doesn't work, the egg is firmly on my face, you know, and I'm not doing this for any other reason than to see if the songs can be moved on further.
Enjoy the Silence at the time was a ballad or a slow song, and in that form I remember it, but not as something that immediately made me think that was going to be a kind of a key moment in their career.
From the outset, we'd wanted to work in different ways to the previous album, and we're starting to get results we were happy with Personal Jesus, World in My Eyes. And when we came to do Enjoy the Silence, Martin had come up with a demo that was really just a harmonium or an organ and voice. And I think it was clear to everyone that this was a good melody, but in some way we weren't necessarily going to get the best out of the song by sort of recreating that.
And Alan and Flood actually had the idea to turn it round. And they sort of basically said to me and Fletcher and Mark, you know, piss off for a couple of days. And which was difficult because we were out in Denmark in Puck Studios, which was out in the middle of nowhere, and there was nothing to do apart from be in the studio.
And so I suggested, look, I've got this sort of vague idea about making it a fast, almost dance track. What do you think? And there was an initial resistance to it. I think Martin wasn't too keen.
The song was called Enjoy the Silence, and, you know, that seemed to be in total contrast with a disco track.
But they did. And then we came back in and Flood got Martin to play this guitar line, which ended up being the line on the song, and it inspired me to sort of go in and sing over it to this beat.
Within an hour, we knew we had a massive hit.
All I ever wanted, all I ever needed is here in my arms. Words are very unnecessary. They can only do harm.
I don't document much, I don't write much down. So I sometimes arrive at certain ideas, and then I have not much of an idea how I got there in the first place. But there was something about Enjoy the Silence that I felt that, like a king, like as a symbol of somebody who has everything. What he looks for is something very simple that's hopefully available to all of us, that doesn't need the money, but it's just, you know, a quiet place to sit.
All I ever wanted, all I ever needed is here in my arms. Words are very unnecessary. They can only do harm.
Quite hard sell, actually, because by that time they got a little bit more involved into what we were doing. And also I think they realized this Enjoy the Silence was such an amazing song for them. Maybe it was the best song up till then that they felt they had written. That they couldn't see this image working for that song.
You know, when he first presented us with the idea for Enjoy the Silence, of me walking around in a king's outfit with a deck chair, I thought he was mad, you know.
We sat down with the band in a room with Daniel Miller, and Anton said, okay, my idea is a king with a deck chair. And that was it. Everyone was looking at him and he was going, well, I think that's a good idea. And they're going, what do you mean? Well, you know, where's the rest of the ideas? So I think we'll do something with the king in a deck chair, and we might go to a few places. And it was a huge step for the band to actually say yes to that video.
Enjoy the Silence was amazing because amazing for me, Martin and Alan, but not for Dave. Our bit took about an hour in a studio, and Dave had about 5 days in freezing cold conditions.
I think he'd had about enough by the time he got to, I think it was like Switzerland or somewhere. I can't remember where they were out in the snow for, like, you know, a day. So yeah, in the end he said to Richard, like, any long shots, you're doing them.
And I'm not very good in making scripts or communicating ideas very well. It's just in my head, and I think it will work. You know, so it's not an arrogant, but I think, well, you know, let me do it, kind of thing. But I had to actually come back 3 times with that idea, like, because the problem is, for me at least, if I have an idea in my head for a certain song, I find it very hard to throw that idea away and start afresh. Every time I hear that song, the idea I had comes back into my head, so I couldn't think of anything else. So I had to come back to them with the same idea, and in the end, I guess they just got fed up and said, well, let's just make it.
But yeah, obviously, you know, it turned out as one of the best videos we've ever made.
Enjoy the silence.
In a previous interview with Martin Gore, he was quoted as saying that Dodger Stadium was a one-time thing and that you guys would never do another stadium concert again. I was wondering what the factor was that
Rose Bowl, you mean? Rose Bowl.
Yeah.
I probably lied.
I don't want to use the word cashing in on the, you know, on the work that had been done, but it was, you know, it was the peak for a band to get to that point, you know, where you can go do that sort of business. I mean, who's done it? U2, you know, they were up there.
Right at the time of Behind the Wheel and all that, from my perspective of watching MTV a lot and being in America, it really felt to me like at that time the band was really trying to cross over from being just looked at as a new wave electronic act into a mainstream rock band that just happened to play with synthesizers. That felt like, you know, it was obviously a gigantic step for them to be able to cross over to the more mainstream rock and roll American audience, and I think they did it very successfully. So if there might have been any transition or growing pains, it might have been more at that moment, but by Violator, I think they were firmly entrenched in that stylistic approach where they would combine the best of rock with a very electronic kind of mindset.
I was the most amazed person that Depeche Mode had cracked it over here so big, because, you know, out of all the kind of English bands, Depeche Mode's music you would have thought would have been the least likely to succeed in the kind of American rock market.
We've built and built over the course of the last 10 years through live performance and through alternative radio, and it's now spilling over into top 40 radio. And in some ways it's a much stronger position to be in, because at least we feel, you know, we're not one-hit wonders or an overnight band who's just going to disappear next week.
It was a big tour, you know, it was just like, hey, here they are, they've come. You know, they've come of age. They are a legitimate, bona fide arena headlining act in America. Yeah, that's it. End of story.
Well, we take megawatts on the road. So we've had some loud crowds. Montreal was incredibly loud, and also we played Salt Lake City the other night, and they were a very, very loud audience as well.
I think the weather was terrible when we arrived, and we couldn't play the show. It was an outdoor venue. There was a thunderstorm or something. It was too dangerous to go on. But we managed to, or the agent, someone managed to reschedule it to an indoor arena the next day. I think it was called the Cow Shed or something like that. It was a real makeshift gig. And it had been such a disappointment the previous night, but all the people that then came the next night were so up for it. It was one of the best shows we ever played. And another one I remember, the greatest audience, was in Chile or somewhere, where we'd had a terrible day, and we'd been driven to this show and in a sort of a van with all the windows blown out, and then he ran over a dog as he drove us to the show. When we got there to the sound check, the promoter had sold the advertising rights 10 times over, and there was a gunfight. Up the road was a football riot, and the street was burning, and we thought we just want to leave this town. It was horrible. And we got to the gig and we played the show, and it was the best ever. The audience were absolutely crazy.
Quite a lot of the halls as well have had sort of a maximum decibel levels that the PA is not supposed to go above, and the crowds have been going above that between the songs when we're not playing.
The big deal was playing the stadiums. I mean, that was, at that stage, stadium stuff was, Bruce Springsteen, Bon Jovi, it wasn't like Depeche Mode. So again, it was like a big milestone. I mean, 2 nights at Dodger Stadium, you can count the bands on your hand that have been able to do that.
I think that we were aware that we were making a record that was exciting. It certainly was exciting to make. I mean, I have very fond memories of making Violator on every level. That the partying had hit an all-time high, the experimentation, the excitement in the studio, the songs. But I don't think we were really aware of what was going on, like in terms of people waiting for this record and what was about to explode.
Sometimes you could say that the edge of something is never stable. It's always that there's like forces that keep, it's like tectonic plates. But for whatever it is, when I worked with them on the Violator things, it really felt that there was a confluence there of that electronic sound and the pop sensibility that was just perfect.
Remember the playback session for Violator, because I hadn't heard the whole album put together in the running order. They were still sort of like chopping and changing. So when I came in to listen to it, in some respects it was like the first time that I'd heard it all put together. And I remember when we finished listening to it, I just turned around and looked at Daniel. We did our sort of trademark, which was enough to say, both of us went, this is a really, really, really good album. And you just had this feeling that you'd made something special.
Yeah, if I had to look back at all of our albums, then I think I would probably choose Violator as my favourite.
All of us obviously want, you want to be respected, you want people to like what you do. But ultimately, You can't worry about those things, you know, when you're making music. You've just got to make music that you like to make.
I can hardly think of a way it could have been better received than it was, honestly. I mean, I was actually quite flabbergasted, like astounded on how massive it became, like not just in the States, like worldwide.